Welcome back to Nonstop Recap. Today we'll be going over the 2011 romantic comedy Friends with Benefits. We're first introduced to Dylan Harper as he leads a work meeting to decide on the new website content for an independent news blog. He gets a call that he's tardy for a date and rushes out as we see Jamie waiting outside of a movie theater. It's soon revealed that Jamie isn't actually talking to Dylan, but rather her boyfriend, Quincy. As Dylan arrives to a John Mayer concert where his girlfriend Kayla has been waiting, we see both Dylan and Jamie suffer simultaneous rejections from their partners. Both are broken up with for being self-centered and emotionally unavailable, and decide soon after that they're done with relationships altogether. We then cut to Dylan on a flight to New York where he angers the stewardess for insulting hero pilot Chesley Sullenberger. Meanwhile, Jamie changes clothes in a taxi and we learn that she's employed as a corporate recruiter. Jamie gets to the airport where she steals a pickup sign from a professional driver but quickly loses it to the baggage claim. As she flounders to retrieve the sign, Dylan meets her and we learn that she's recruited him for a position as GQ's new art director. He passes his interview but he's uncertain about leaving his home in Los Angeles, so Jamie decides to sell him on New York. She starts by taking him to an outdoor bar where Dylan is threatened by Shaun White and learns that Shaun and Jamie are old friends. Jamie then takes Dylan to her favorite rooftop view of the city, but it's ultimately a flash mob in Times Square that sells him on taking the job. He goes home to celebrate with his co-workers and then hops a flight back to New York where he insults Captain Sully some more. After getting yelled at by a cab driver and exploring his new apartment, he starts his first day at the GQ office. Dylan introduces himself to his new co-workers and meets sports editor Tommy, who almost instantly assumes that Dylan is gay. Jamie swings by the office and Dylan shows her that he's already working on an ad campaign based on their flash mob experience. Jamie has Dylan sign his contract and tells him not to quit within the first year or she won't receive her recruitment bonus. When Dylan asks Jamie to lunch, she briefly goes off on him that she isn't looking to date anybody, but agrees to have lunch as friends. During lunch, Kayla calls Dylan and jumpstarts a conversation about Dylan and Jamie's shared emotional unavailability. But again, they agree to be friends and Jamie invites Dylan to a party. Dylan arrives at Jamie's party and we see a brief montage of the two enjoying each other's company, playing games, and drawing on each other's faces. Sometime later, Dylan and Jamie watch a cheesy romantic comedy together and mock its cliches, but we learn that Jamie is actually a fan and dreams of finding her own true love. She also reveals that not dating has caused her to become physically frustrated. When Dylan sees Jamie bend over, he suggests they should hook up casually. They agree to start a physical relationship but to remain friends without getting emotionally attached. As they undress and start to get intimate, Jamie tells Dylan that they'll only be hooking up once. He then tries to pleasure her and turns out to be supremely terrible at it before they switch positions and she gets him off almost immediately. Soon after, Dylan meets with Tommy and they disagree over a magazine cover when Dylan bitterly refuses to feature Shaun White. He's interrupted by a visit from Jamie and it's quickly apparent that things have become awkward between them. They go for a walk and decide not to hook up again. But when a street artist confuses them for a couple, they instantly relapse into each other's company. This fires off a long sequence of repeat hookups punctuated by small talk, bickering, and one awkward trip to the bathroom. Finally, one of their hookups is interrupted when Jamie's mother, Lorna, walks in on them. After Lorna introduces herself to Dylan, Jamie gets embarrassed and kicks him out. Dylan later plays basketball with Tommy, where Tommy unabashedly hits on the other players. After the game, Dylan opens up to Tommy about his no-strings arrangement with Jamie, but Tommy warns him that it will never work and that Dylan is more susceptible to attachment than he realizes. Dylan tries to argue, but Tommy dismisses him and leaves the conversation by jumping into the river and taking his personal boat to New Jersey. Meanwhile, Lorna supports Jamie's arrangement with Dylan because she too likes to sleep around, and in fact doesn't even know who Jamie's father was. When Dylan comes over to meet up with Jamie, she decides that she doesn't want to be like her mother and ends things with Dylan to start dating again. Dylan respects her decision, and they get dressed to have lunch together. After lunch, Dylan decides to flirt with a beautiful woman but gets turned down when she turns out to be married. Jamie then decides to flirt with a handsome Parker and succeeds in landing a date. As Jamie and Parker go on a series of dates together, she explains her belief in true love and reveals that she has a rule about not sleeping with a man until the 5th date. Meanwhile, Tommy invites Dylan to a bar where he believes Dylan could pick up women. Dylan initially turns him down, but changes his mind when Jamie sends him a photo of her and Parker. On their 5th date, Jamie and Parker make out before sleeping together on her couch. Dylan, meanwhile, hooks up with an aggressive woman but is interrupted when his sister Annie calls to confirm that he'll be spending the 4th of July with his family. The next morning, Jamie wakes up to a call from Dylan. As she tries to find a place to talk, Lorna tells her that she wants to spend the 4th roasting marshmallows together in Long Island. Jamie goes to get coffee while she talks to Dylan, but hangs up when she catches Parker sneaking out of her apartment. She confronts him and learns that he was never interested in a real relationship. She visits Dylan as he packs for his trip home and tells him that she's starting to fear it's her own fault that she can't meet the right guy. He tries to reassure her and gives her a painting that he's had commissioned for her. She then goes home to collect her mother for their trip, but finds a note revealing that her mother has ditched her to spend the weekend with an ex-boyfriend. When she calls Dylan to complain, he invites her to spend the weekend meeting his family. He books her a flight, and she quickly shuts down his Captain Sully trash talk on the plane. They arrive at Dylan's childhood home where Jamie meets his magician nephew Sam, who lights himself on fire during a magic trick. She then meets his sister Annie, followed by his father, who is quickly revealed to be in the mid-stages of Alzheimer's. That night, while Annie shows Jamie pictures of Dylan, he tells them he's going to bed. But he later enters Jamie's room, assuming that her breakup with Parker means they can start hooking up again. She rejects him, but they get drunk and listen to music together before ultimately realizing how deeply they care for one another. She kisses him, and they sleep together more emotionally than ever before. Dylan wakes in the middle of the night, and Annie sees him sneaking out of Jamie's room. The next morning, Jamie senses Dylan acting standoffish but doesn't say anything. Dylan later rides jet skis with Sam, and Sam tells Dylan that he approves of Jamie before revealing that his father's Alzheimer's has been getting worse. This is demonstrated over dinner that very night when Dylan's father asks about his wife and has a public outburst when Dylan and Annie try to tell him that he's divorced. The next day, Dylan and Jamie go on a hike to the Hollywood sign where Jamie convinces Dylan to climb a fence so they can get closer. When she tries to confront him about the fact that he's never opened up about his father's illness, he gets angry and snaps at her. She asks if he's acting weird because of their recent hookup, but he tells her that it didn't mean anything to him. The conversation is soon interrupted when a police helicopter shows up and orders them down from the sign. But Dylan becomes paralyzed by his fear of heights and has to be rescued. Annie later asks Dylan about the night he slept with Jamie, not knowing that Jamie is in the other room helping Sam with a magic trick. Jamie hides and listens as Dylan tells Annie that he could never like Jamie because she's too damaged to be in a relationship. Feeling hurt and betrayed, Jamie decides to return home early. She receives a text from Dylan shortly after arriving, but decides to ignore it. When Dylan returns to GQ, he throws himself into work, ignoring Tommy's offers to go out. Tommy tells him that the main key to happiness is simply holding on to the one you love. Meanwhile, Jamie researches Captain Sully and receives an apology message from Lorna before ignoring another call from Dylan. When Lorna comes over and sees Jamie ignore yet another call from Dylan, she tells Jamie that he seems like a nice guy, but Jamie shuts her down and insults her. Soon after, Jamie is told that Amazon wants to hire Dylan, which would violate his contract with GQ. Dylan later tries to call Jamie again, but this time realizes that he's near her favorite rooftop and conveniently manages to find her there. He tries to work things out, but she tells him that he was never a good friend and was simply using her. Later, she receives a call that Amazon has decided to approach Dylan directly without her involvement. She goes to his office to put out the fire, but learns that he's at a photo shoot with Tommy. She heads there just to learn that Dylan hasn't decided about the Amazon job and that this time-wasting subplot isn't worth resolving. Later, Dylan calls Annie and makes plans to care for their father while Annie goes out of town. Jamie opens up to Lorna about her issues with Dylan, and Lorna reveals that Jamie's father was the only man she ever cared about, and that forgetting him was merely a defense mechanism. Dylan, meanwhile, picks his dad up from the airport and they go to get lunch. When his dad sneaks off and removes his pants, Dylan takes his own pants off to save his dad from embarrassment. As they eat lunch in their underwear, Dylan's father has a lucid moment and tells Dylan that he needs to fix things with Jamie, because Alzheimer's has taught him that life is too short to let good things pass us by. As they leave, Dylan runs into Shaun White again, who reveals that his hatred for Dylan is based on jealousy over his relationship with Jamie. Dylan and his father get stuck in traffic, so they take Tommy's boat into the city while Dylan makes a call to request a favor before leaving his dad at his apartment. Later, Jamie waits for Lorna at Grand Central Station when a giant flash mob starts up around her. This turns out to be a grand gesture by Dylan, who admits that he messed things up and that he just wants his best friend back. She kisses him, and they decide to try out a real relationship. The movie ends as they embark on their first real date before ultimately getting bored and hooking up on the cafe table. Thanks for watching Nonstop Recap.